evening, this is Miss Pillai. Today I will be discussing something very interesting about science. Before going into topic, let us understand what topic we will be talking about. For example, if I give you a basket full of fruits and I ask you to choose apples out of it, what you will do? You will go check where the apples are there in the basket and try to separate it. So, from this, what one can understand, what will be the today's topic? Please comment down below. For now, I will disclose the name since we have to talk about the topic itself. So, today, as I said, I want apples to be separated, I want grapes to be separated, I want peaches to be separated. So, what exactly I am emphasizing on? That is separation of substances. Today's topic will be of separation of substances. Why separation of substance is very essential? Why there is a need to study about separation of substances? Because we use it every day in our everyday life. Yes, we use it every day in our everyday life. Sounds kind of repetitive, yet we depend on separation of substances a lot. Now, let us understand if one desires to drink tea, how one will generate a tea or produce a tea. You can see the one will take tea leaves, put it in hot boiling water, allow the essence to get sinked into the water. Water should get saturated enough, and then from that you try to pour it in filter. Through filter, when the water has been added, it filters out the tea leaves and we get a clear tea. To drink a clear tea, we depend on filtration. To have a clear rice, we depend on separation. That is, we remove the stones from using hand picking method. We hand pick the stones and clear rice is observed. Even for churning out butter, we use separation method. Churning of milk, we use separation method. Now, as I said, separation method is very essential for day-to-day life. So why separation of substance is essential? We will be studying that in on a deeper context. Further, why? Separation process is what we can observe is separation of stone from the rice, sorry, I'm so sorry, separation of stones from rice, churning milk from butter, and separation of tea leaves. So what is the purposefulness and what are the uses for that? That we will understand. Separate stones from rice. To remove non-useful components, we can say we are removing certain things which are not at all useful for us and keeping the components which are useful for us. Churning milk to obtain butter. To separate two different but useful components here. Even milk is important and butter is also important. Separate tea leaves to remove impurities from the harmful component. Impurities we are removing out. Okay, these are certain separation process which we observe till now. What are the different states of matter? You might think we are going tangent here, but trust me, we are not going tangent here. So, what are the states of matter? How many are there? So, there are total 3 states of matter, that is solid, liquid, and gaseous. We can simply take the example of water here. If I take a glass of water and refrigerate it, what will happen? It will turn into a solid. It will turn into the solid. The particles get more closer to each other and that leads to solidification of the particular component. That is, components get solidified. Solid. Once I take that ice cube out, take the glass of water outside once it is completely frozen, and then when I try to, heat it, what will happen? Heating this ice, it will try to melt the ice first and it will convert into liquid state. If I keep on heating the component, if I keep on heating the liquid further to when it reaches its boiling point, that is 100 degrees Celsius, it will start to turn into gaseous form. So three states of matter one can observe using the example of water. In solid state, it is extremely cold, and in gaseous state, because it turned very hot, it turned into gaseous state. Next, how the separation process can be done if I mixed salt and water. If I mix salt and water. So, for example, if I mix salt in water and I dissolved it and I've given it. So, I ask you to separate the salt from water. Can you directly separate it? Absolutely no, not a possibility here. You cannot sit and hand pick each and every salt crystals because it could have got dissolved in it. So what is the other way from which we can use to separate salt and water? As I said, use of states of matter. That is, mixture of salt and water, we'll keep it in a bowl, we'll turn the burner on, allow it to boil. Once the water gets transformed into form of gas, salt remains at the bottom layer. We can collect the salt from here. This phenomena is used even in salt pans from which we procure salts. Now, what are the different separation methods which we will be observing today is hand picking, threshing, winnowing and searing. We will observe each method one by one. Hand picking, it's very simplest form of clearing out the impurities from a desired product. This is, if we say there is, if we see the rice, there would be presence of small stones in that. How we can separate it? We can just simply hand pick it. I can show you a video for that.
Separating solids from solids. Hand picking. Before washing rice for cooking, we first remove the paddy, husk and stones from the mixture. This method is commonly used for separating slightly larger sized impurities like the pieces of dirt, stone and husk from wheat, rice or pulses.
As you observed in this video, you can see the how he is clearing off the impurities from his desired products by simply handpicking it. Handpicking is efficient when the size of impurities is quite big and you can use it efficiently in such cases, but not in every cases. As I mentioned, every method has its pluses and minus, has its pros and cons. You can see if the impurity size is very small, you cannot sit and handpick every of the impurity. For that, what methods can be used? We will be navigating further. Threshing. This is another form of separation of substances. When you observe the grain, there are two parts. That the upper part we call it as shaft, and inside the shaft there is presence of grain. You cannot sit and pluck off each shaft from the grains. It will take a lot amount of time and energy behind that. For clearing off the shaft from the grain, what methods can be used is just by thrashing the crops in a particular place so that the grain gets separated off from the shaft and the grains could be collected and stored in warehouses. So how exactly this method can be done can be shown by a video. This is how threshing of substances can be done very efficiently. Now, once threshing is done, in previous video you observed that they are inserting the full grain inside the bag, and then they are threshing it. Once the threshing is done, you can separate the chaff by using winnowing method. Winnowing method basically uses gravity for separation, and how exactly it is done will be explained in this video. That is, before going into video, I would like to give a certain skeleton of how winnowing is done. You can see you have to stand in a particular direction where the wind is blowing very roughly in a very strong manner, and from that higher altitude, if you drop down the shafts and grain which you have threshed earlier, you can see the separation is happening automatically and the grains are falling out and the impurities are flying off. So this method basically use the weight difference of particular shaft and grain. Weight of shaft is less than a weight of grain, so the grains will fall down and the shaft will be blown away by the air. So this is the efficient method for separation of grain from chaff. This is how this method is done. Can just directly go to how this method can be done. Just a moment. This is how a winnowing method can be done using artificial means, but always a natural method is preferred. You can see how grains are falling down and the shaft is flying away. This is how the winnowing method can be done. Fishing, sifting and winnowing. This is the third step. This particular grain is wheat. So this is how winnowing can be done. Now the next method which we will be observing is sieving. Sieving, we use basically sieve to separate off different substances, separate off from particular mixture. You can see the sand and gravel. If you want to separate the sands from the gravel, and you have to do the separation between sand and gravel. What one can do is can put the mass or lump into the strainer, and you can just shake it. The sand which are finer will pass it down and the gravel will remain at the top of the strainer. This is how the separation can be performed. This is how sieving can be performed. This is the efficient method of separating the substances when the sizes are different, when there is a prominent size difference. Next, what are the separation of finer particles? How finer particles can be separated? There are several methods for separation of finer particles, that is sedimentation, decantation, filtration, evaporation. One more is there, that is condensation. We will be learning each method one by one with a proper example. Now, what is sedimentation? If you've come across muddy water in beaches, just take a sample out of it, scoop out a sample, and allow it to keep it for some time. Allow the particles to get settled down. So once the particle gets settled down, the mud gets settled down at the base, and clear water can be observed in the upper layer. That you can remove. That removal method we call it as decantation. We call it as decantation. So first let us understand sedimentation. What principle is there behind the sedimentation? Simple, gravity. You keep the muddy water for some hours or some minutes and allow the particles to settle down. Simply the settlement of particles in the basal layer is called sedimentation, and the clear part of water which you observe, which you get it further, is because the sedimentation happened because of gravity. Next process we call it as decantation. The classic example which we can take is what happens when you mix water and oil? Will it get mixed? Oil is immiscible in water, it won't get dissolved in water. So you can see the prominent layer difference here. So Once you observe the prominent layer difference, if I want to separate oil from water, what will I do? I will simply try to remove this part from this part. As simple as you heard, you can use glass rod to decant. If you want to remove this part, just tilt the beaker slightly, and then with the help of glass rod you can just remove off the oil part from the water, or you can just remove clear water from the sediment, any sediment if you come across. For example, if you take the muddy water itself, mud would be settled down at the basal layer, and with the help of glass rod you can just transfer clear water to another beaker itself. So this method is very prominent, very useful for separation of substances. Next, filtration. Filtration we come across every day. We need filtration to drink a clear water. There are so much advertisements that run across in today's television, that is RO filter, UV filter. What is all this? These are the methods of filtration. So why filtration is required? If filtration didn't exist, we will be drinking muddy water, and that will cause a lot amount of problem. Even to drink our favorite beverages such as tea, we need filtration. So beaker containing a mixture, when we pour it from filter paper you can just make a cone of out of it and just place it inside the funnel. Basically aids for proper transportation of mixture onto a conical flask. So, if a mixture is present in the beaker and if you pour it inside the filter paper, the residue will get settled here and filtrate will flow down to conical flask. Filtrate which we observe are the clear solutions, which is free of impurities. This is kind of technical way of explaining filtration. To put it very simply, I would like to show tea filtration. You can see what are the ingredients of tea preparation. Tea leaves are there here, and what one can do is tea in a cup of water. You are mixing it now. Just mix it. Yeah, the individual is adding a lot amount of tea powder. Now, what the person is doing, what the individual is doing is, once the water gets saturated enough, you try to filter the tea through filter pores. Only tea will pass and the residue will get settled here. That is in filter. And clear filtrate, that is your tea, you can enjoy further. This is the simple method of filtration one can use every day. Now, I hope this is clear. This much is clear. Now, next step is evaporation. What exactly evaporation means? It's very simple, nothing complicated as such. When there is a salt solution, when the salt solution is heated in an evaporating dish, what happens? I want to separate salt from a mixture of salt and water. What will I do? I will take that solution, I will heat it and make sure that it boils nicely. Water gets evaporated out and salt crystals remain. This phenomena is exactly adapted in salt pans, and salt pans are active source of salts for us. So this same method is used, but the heating is done in a natural way via sunlight. We don't artificially heat the areas. Next, what is condensation here? It's very simple. It is somewhat related to evaporation, and one can easily understand if given on context of water cycle. If the water is heated, once it reaches the boiling point, it gets condensed, it gets converted into a gas. And when this gas is allowed to pass through a cooling temperature, the particles get condensed back into form of water droplets, and the condensed part is collected into another beaker. This is more of a technical way of explaining condensation. To put it very simply, you can go for water cycle. Sun heat rays are fallen upon the sea, water gets evaporated, and evaporated gas reaches the particular layer where it cools off and get condensed into form of clouds. When the wind blows and clouds, the precipitation happens, it falls down in a form of rain, and once the water is forming, water is coming in the form of rain, it get collected in different water sources. This is the classic example of condensation. Can also go for fermented food cooking. That condensation you can view in that also. Next is saturation. The name itself gives away what a saturation is. Students these days use these terms when there is a back-to-back lectures happening. I am saturated. I can't take it anymore. Like that. Somewhat situation is similar here. You can observe the saturation of water when I keep on mixing the salt. What is saturation point? We can observe it. Water is added. Now, 1 spoon of salt got added. We'll give it a nice mix. The salt gets dissolved in the water. Nicely, we're mixing it. Aha, we got the salt water here. Everything got dissolved. I'm still curious further what will happen if I put 1 more spoon of salt. I'm giving it a nice mix again. Nice mixing was given again. Mixing is happening. Let us fast forward. If we added more and more salt, what happens? What exactly happens? Try to dissolve it. It's not getting dissolved. That happens. At particular point, the water will not dissolve the salt, and salt will remain at the bottom layer without getting dissolved. That means the water gets completely saturated. It can't take salt anymore further. This is what the demonstration was all about. You can see the salt getting deposited in the base because it is not getting dissolved and water got completely saturated. This is the idea behind it, showing what is saturation. At one point, water was not able to dissolve the salt anymore. So this phenomena we call it as saturation. Further, so this was the last phenomenon which we observed, that is saturation. I hope this much was understood. Thank you so much for listening, and some of the references and images are taken from internet. Some videos are original. I hope the original owners are kind enough to ignore this. Thank you so much for listening. This is your host, Miss Pillai, signing off. Take care.